Hello and welcome to the Field Guides. I'm Bill and I'm here with Steve and I'm also here with Daniel. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon, Bill.
How we doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. And what we're going to do today is get you in the field, in the woods, and on the trail. Each episode, we pick a natural history topic, research the science behind that topic, and then get you out to a natural spot and share with you everything that we've learned. And today, I have done very little research for once. It was kind of nice.
Whoa. See, it is nice, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, Steve's like, there it is.
I finally know what it feels like to be Steve. So this is a Daniel heavy episode. He has done the hard work on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, so today we are focusing on one of the best symbols of New York State wilderness, and that is a really awesome member of the weasel family, the fisher.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so Steve is just finding out what we're doing. So
Yes, it was kept from me.
They're coming to kill us.
No,
The
for
fishers?
sure. Some might think.
Well, that's one thing. I did do a little bit of research, but just in my travels and discussions with people about wildlife, I do find that there is a somewhat negative attitude towards fishers with certain people.
Well, that's part of why I thought this would be a good topic. One, because they are this really badass animal. They're elusive. They are kind of representative of a symbol, a wilderness, but there are some negative stigmas about them and some misconceptions about them. So I just thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about an animal that few people know about and a lot of people don't even know that we have around here in Western New York.
So today I was sitting in a meeting at school and I was, instead of paying attention, doing some research for this episode.
Classic.
My coworker did lean over and they're like, what are you working on, a thesis or something? I'm like, no, I'm working on the podcast. We're going to do an episode on fishers. And she's like, oh, they're so aggressive. And I'm like, well, yes, they are excellent predators. But so have you come across that, Steve? Like antipathy towards?
I would just think of them as elusive. Like, I think what you said earlier, where most people don't even know we have them in the area, I think that's something I would relate with more than that they're aggressive.
Okay.
But also, I don't raise chickens or anything. Do they go after people's animals, or what makes them aggressive?
We could talk about that
Okay,
in
cool,
a bit.
cool.
But yeah, this is an animal that I didn't even know existed until my senior year of college at UB. I mean, I've been an outdoors person my whole life, and
Yeah.
when I was an intern with my now current employer, Spirit, my colleagues were mentioning that they found fisher tracks, or they even saw a fisher.
And you're pretending you knew what they were talking about?
No, what I thought, that's normally what I do, but in this case, I thought that they were just saying another name for a mink. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Just because the way they were describing how it looks, because it looks like a mink, it's just larger.
But I would probably say I was the same way, and I grew up in the woods around here, and I'm trying to think back. It's a long time ago now. What about you, Steve? Because I don't think I'd heard of fishers until I was probably in college.
That makes me feel better.
I actually think that I learned about fishers roughly at the same time, because I think I was actually taking Sandy's class. So Sandy's the head of Earth Spirit.
Yeah.
And I think one of my friends was like, oh yeah, I just saw a beautiful fisher. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. My mind didn't go to anything. It was like, that. There's no way that that's short for kingfisher. I don't, if it's a mammal, I couldn't tell you what it was going to look like, you know?
Well, I feel way better now.
Yeah.
It's not just you. Before you get into it, though,
Sure.
can we tell people where we're at?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so we are at Hunters Creek County Park.
Yeah.
And we actually were just here. I think this is the first time we've recorded so quickly the same spot.
It had a much longer name on Google Maps.
It did.
Yeah.
So
I
it
didn't
is-
I didn't recognize that.
It is
long
named
name.
after a person. It's actually Sergeant Mark Rademacher Park.
Yeah.
But most people just around here refer to it as
Hunters Creek.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Some of the signs you'll see around here. But so this is a county park, very well traveled. There's about 600 acres here, but it is adjacent to a private nature preserve owned by our friends at the Western New York Land Conservancy. And I'm thinking, Daniel, you chose this site because fishers have been seen.
They have. This is one of the, I would say, probably one of the premier spots to see them, locally in Western New York. Because we'll get more into habitat later, but they do like second growth, some more mature forests and more wild places. And
that's what we have here.
That's where we are.
Yeah, so we have a lot
it's a good spot for that.
A lot of second growth,
Yeah.
but then some some old growth as well too.
And when I finally heard about what a fisher was and I like Google searched it, I was like, oh my gosh, these are running around out there? Like, I was so surprised by it. And it would be several years until I actually had an encounter with one. And it was when I was working at Rhinestone Woods Nature Preserve in Depew. And in classic fashion, none of my colleagues believed me when I saw it. Yeah. So it ran right across the trail in front of me. I didn't get a great look at it, but it was way too big to be a mink, too agile and slim to be a beaver. And it didn't look like a river otter, which has been seen at Rhinestone Woods before. So I figured it had to be a fisher. No one believed me, which is fine, because we understand how misidentifications can happen. But then, like maybe half a year later, I got a real good look at one up in a spruce tree near the library in the woods. And luckily, my camera was in my car, so I sprinted back to my car, ran back to the area, and the fisher was still there.
Wow.
And I got a picture of it. It wasn't a great photo, but it was undeniably a fisher, and that was the first time it's ever been officially documented at Rhinestone Woods. So that's a great story because it's a good testament to how much they're expanding and reclaiming areas where they were formerly extirpated from. And that's a big thing that we'll talk about with today as well.
It was actually just a squirrel.
Do I gotta share the pictures?
I think it's probably good also to admit that I'm a relatively outdoorsy guy. Maybe not in the last few years in my PhD and everything, but I don't think I've seen a fisher. I've seen a lot of minks because I used to do a lot of work at fisheries and things like that. And like I've seen them pop up from behind a pier, like with a fish in its mouth, and then go back. It almost looked like I'm using my hand right now that you guys can't see, but it reminded me of like if someone was like puppeteering it from behind the pier. It literally just looked like they popped it up like a little cartoon character, put it down, came back up, and the fish was gone. Like I think it stored it in like a little crevice or something.
Oh, okay.
But and I used to see him. Yeah, I used to see him from time to time at a bunch of the different boat docks and
The
stuff
minks.
that I used to. Yeah, the minks, but not fishers. I don't think I've seen a fisher.
Yeah, I've seen them in the Adirondacks.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
for the listeners out there who might be wondering, guys, what the heck does a fisher actually look like? Daniel is going to get into that.
Yeah.
But the last thing about where we're at, I do want to give people the sense that we are here in, well, it's about late April. We're getting into late April here in
Yeah.
Western New York. So I'm imagining as we hike today, we are going to be coming across some of our spring ephemerals. It's a rainy, cloudy day, so I don't know if they'll be open, but this is a good time for us to be in the woods in terms of distractions. Right?
Oh yeah.
It's easy for naturalists to get distracted.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
know.
sure.
There's already like a whole carpet of trout lily
Yeah.
to our left.
Trout lilies everywhere in the
Yeah.
woods here. All right, and then as we walk, it is pretty muddy today, folks. I don't know if you heard us tromping through a muddy stretch of trail, so one of us may take a spill.
Yeah.
My money's it'll be Bill.
Probably. All right, so let's walk a little bit, and Dana can tell us what they look like.
Okay. So the fisher resembles the martin, but it's larger and darker in color, and it has some patchy parts of white or cream, on the underparts there.
What does a martin look
So
like?
martin, so I saw this too. This
It's
is
going to
a
be mammals
description
all the
from
way down.
ESL.
Now Martin looks like this, and this looks like this.
So I'll finish up with this one first. They have rather coarse fur that's long and thick, and it's slightly glossy, and it can be anywhere from dark brown to black, and it's darkest on the tail, feet, and the back. And during the winter time, it tends to be even more glossy and darker, and that's why that's when people are attempting to trap them for their fur. The guard hairs of the head, neck, and shoulders have white or golden brown tips, which are lightest and most conspicuous on older males. Their cylindrical body is muscular, the legs are short and stout, and the feet are relatively large with 5 toes, possessing sharp, retractable claws. This makes them well adapted to walking on snow, climbing trees, and grabbing a hold of their prey as well. A really cool adaptation about them as well is their back legs can rotate nearly 180 degrees, so
Whoa.
that allows them to descend headfirst from trees like squirrels. Yeah, not all tree climbing mammals can do that.
Whoa.
So, and that's the one at Rhinestone did that. He descended the tree head first. It's like, whoa, kind of
funny.
an interesting skill set.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just watching a video last night, and I remember thinking, man, a large section of the video had them going down a tree slowly, and it just, in my head, I'm like, how can they do that? But I could see that his back feet were somewhat turned around.
Yes,
So-
and that's the adaptation that allows them to do that, for sure.
And then everything that Dana just said about what they look like, I'm going to succinctly just say they look like a weasel. They look like a fat, chunky weasel,
Right.
right?
I should have just
Like
said
everyone's
that.
got a cartoonish version of a weasel in their
Yeah.
mind,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Although
they are,
skunks are weasels.
are they the
And
biggest?
I don't think they look like a weasel.
That is true.
Cartoonish weasel.
That is true. But are fishers the largest mustelid in
They are not. River otters are bigger.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
river,
Yeah.
but they're second to river otters.
But I've heard one of their common names is tree otter.
Tree otter?
Tree
Yeah,
otter.
I read that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got a bunch of different nicknames.
Tree fox.
All the
Tree
charismatic
fox,
animals do.
Tree
Yeah.
otter.
So speaking of their size, they have a long bushy tail that tapers towards the tip, and that accounts for nearly half their total length, which can be anywhere from like 31 to 40 inches on average. And their weight can be between 4 and 16 pounds on average. The largest that I could find came from Maine and was 20 pounds. So that's a pretty big animal
And
there.
males are bigger than females. Right?
There is a good degree of sexual dimorphism. Females are about 1/2 the size of males in terms of weight. They're about 4 to 10 inches shorter in terms of length. So yeah, there is sexual dimorphism there, with the males being substantially larger.
All right. So when we get to reproduction, the point that I'm thinking in my head, I don't want to steal your thunder. So if we get to reproduction, Steve, try to remember
Okay.
to remind me to ask about male and female size difference related to tree cavities.
Okay.
Okay?
Hopefully, I remember to remind you.
Hopefully I remember to remind Steve to remind you.
Yeah, I like this. Yeah.
The Center for Biological Diversity and some other sources I found stated that their lifespan is around 10 years in the wild. So, to get to their name, because we already mentioned a couple different ones, the two most common ones are fisher and fisher cat. I've probably heard more people say fisher cat than fisher.
And they're all
Fisher
horrible
cat.
names,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they
think
don't
so.
eat fish. They're not cats.
See,
Well, here's the origin.
okay, this is what we need to know.
Yeah, because I was curious about that too. Because when I
Yeah.
first heard fisher, I was like, okay, it eats fish, and I'm like, it's a forest dweller. And
Right.
last
Yeah.
time I checked, not a lot of fish there.
We got to rename this thing by the end of the episode, by the way.
Yeah,
if,
there
if
we
you
go.
don't already have one.
Well, there's some other cool names. Maybe we can go with that.
Okay.
From a bunch of different sources that I can find, including like Vermont Fish and Wildlife, the Adirondack Almanac, fisher most likely derived from the term that European settlers used for European polecats, which was like fitchit and fitchy.
Okay.
So it kind of sounds similar. I'm probably pronouncing those wrong,
Okay.
but a European polecat is not a cat.
But
It's
it
actually
is.
a type. It is? It's a,
No,
it's
no,
a
I'm
weasel.
sorry. I'm saying it is
A weasel.
a weasel.
Okay, yeah, that's it.
Oh,
You
sorry,
beat
no.
me to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
You
a
know
cat.
the polecat weasel? I hate this. Not
at
a
first
pole,
I'm-
not a cat.
Yeah, when
Not
I
a
was
fish.
first looking into it, I was like, how did they get a polecat? It looks nothing like a cat. But then I saw that a polecat is actually a type of weasel, and yes, they do look similar. So that's where that term came from. In
Okay.
terms of fisher cat, all I could find was that, the fact that they run with their tail upwards, they can climb trees, they're around the size of a cat, they bear some resemblance, and that's where fisher cat came from. Although I don't like that term at all. There.
Yeah.
There are other terms that are used for them. One is, I'm not sure if I'm describing this right. It's Pekan, so pecan or pecan. I don't know. That's a tough one in general when you're talking about food.
And let me
alone
guess,
fisher.
it's not a pecan.
So in
I hate this episode so much already.
that was usually used by early like settlers and such, but it originally came from the Abenaki language. And there are also terms that came from Algonquian people such as Weejak, and
like
there's
that one.
other ones like that I can't pronounce, like Osek and Ojig. And there are other terms as well, like Thatcho and Chinicho, which mean big martin. So there's a bunch of different terms for it. Now,
Those terms are so much better.
When I
yeah.
first learned about this animal, and it was called the fisher cat, that was around the same time I learned about martins.
oh, okay.
And one way I remembered it is that the fisher cat is actually closer in size to a dog, and then the martin is closer in size to a cat.
That's not confusing at all.
No,
Hold on. There are birds called martins, right?
spelled differently though. Martin that we're talking about,
Right.
M-A-R-T-E-N.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, still, this has been the worst episode so far.
So we've lost half our audience. Stay with us.
Stay tuned. Yeah, there's some cool stuff we're
moving
going to talk
on.
about. I
This
promise.
episode is about kingfisher and a martin and
Martin Luther King Jr.
changing everything.
We're all over the place on this one. Well, that's what you'd expect when you have me, taking control of this. Now it's time to get into taxonomy here.
This is Bill's favorite part, by the way.
Always. It used to be in the genus Martes, which is the same one as the martin, but more genetic recent studies in 2008 actually put it in its own genus, which is Pekania. So its scientific name is Pekania pennanti.
And
I-
Steve,
I don't know what it means.
what do you call a genus with just one species?
Tell me. Just tell me. Is it?
I don't remember.
I know. I do feel like it's on the tip of my tongue, but monotypic or I don't know. There's
That
something.
sounds right.
So when I looked into the origin of these words, Pekania is definitely derived from that Pekane or Pecan or whatever term
Hang on,
that
I
we
don't think
mentioned
you gave its
earlier.
whole scientific name yet. Did you?
Yeah,
He did.
I did.
I was thinking. Sorry.
Don't worry, I forget things a lot, so please do
does
stuff
it?
like that.
Is there a meaning to it? Does it have any etymology that?
No, I could not. Other than that was the word, that was originally an Algonquin word, or a
I
word
see.
from the Abnaki people.
Right.
So it's taken from that.
So, sometimes you get etymology like that, where it's just
Yes.
like it is the word for this animal, essentially.
It is. Yeah, I looked into like websites for that and everything to try and find out, but that's what I can find. And then for pennanti, the species name, that came from the biologist or naturalist Thomas Pennant, who described the fisher in 1771. That's what I found with that
Yep.
there.
One thing that I will add is that you said the word, or a word for the European polecat was the fichet, or
Something like that.
so the French version of that though was fichet,
Okay. Oh.
and that sounds
That's
more
way
like
closer.
fisher.
Yeah.
So probably French trappers.
And then we've mentioned a few times now that they're a member of the weasel family, or the family that's called Mustelidae. So their range, they are found exclusively in North America. They inhabit a band of forested and semi-forested lands from coast to coast. In the east, they range from Virginia, north to Quebec, and the maritime provinces of Canada. In the west, the fisher historically occurred throughout the northern Rocky Mountains, Cascade, and Coast Ranges, and the Sierra Nevada. The range and abundance of the fisher has decreased drastically in that region due to commercial trapping, changes in forest structure associated with logging and altering fire regimes, which has happened in a lot of different places around the country to places that depend on fire, increased human access, and habitat loss due to urban and recreational development. Stuff like that has happened similarly here in the eastern United States, where fishers experienced severe declinings during the late 1800s and early 1900s due to over-exploitation, so unregulated trapping, loss of forested habitat due to unregulated logging, and clearing of land for farms. So those are big ones here. But on a good note, and this has been a trend for kind of a while now, reintroduction programs have proven to be effective in restoring populations, along with regulating the trapping opportunities and reforesting areas that were formerly farmland. So we've had kind of this combination of foresting former farmlands, creating more suitable habitat for them, and putting limits on trapping, and that has allowed their population to grow in many different areas. And that's why more and more people, such as like my sighting at Rhinestone Woods, are seeing them. So good news all around for the fisher in that aspect. So in terms of New York now, so we're shrinking down to our area, they were extirpated from large portions of New York, with the exception of the Adirondacks in the northern part of the state. And that always continued to be the core of their range. But then eventually, in the mid-70s, they live trapped about 43 fisher from Vermont and northern New York, and they introduced them to suitable habitats in the Catskill Mountains. And then by the mid-1980s already, so not that much longer after, the population was secure enough to sustain limited trapping opportunities. So that's how well that program went. And that first opened in the Catskills in the fall of 1985. Populations continued to expand, and more harvesting opportunities opened up in areas throughout eastern New York. And then more recently, and we've mentioned this before, there is evidence that fisher have continued to expand their populations across central and western New York. And they attribute that to possibly immigrations from the Adirondacks, from Tug Hill, which is the region in between Lake Ontario and the Adirondacks, the Catskills, and even from northern Pennsylvania, which has a lot of forests, and that is speculated to be where a lot of the fisher in the southern tier regions of western New York originated from. They migrated in from northern Pennsylvania.
It's interesting how much things come back to hunting, right? Because even when like deer populations hit kind of scary low numbers in like 1900, right? Or right around then, weren't hunters the ones like pushing for bringing the population back up?
Well, one of the things
Or they're like, I want to kill this thing, like we gotta get their numbers up, I want to trap it,
But one of the big reasons, and you may talk about this when you get to reintroduction efforts, was it was pushed by timber companies. Did you find this?
No.
Efforts were pushed by timber companies to reintroduce fisher because of the lack of predators. Porcupine populations were spiking. And fishers are one of the only mammals that will eat porcupine regularly.
It's funny, I just assumed they'd be kind of close to the same size, or because porcupines can get kind of big, right?
Well, they can, but if you think about, there's not many things that will eat a porcupine.
Sure.
But fishers, they're low to the ground, they're squat, and some people out there who are listening, they may have heard stories that fishers will knock porcupines over and go to town on their belly. From what I found, that is not true, that they will systematically attack the fisher's face over a period of about a half an hour
or more.
Jeez.
Yeah.
until the porcupine dies. And that fishers, too, seem to be somewhat adapted to porcupine quills. Like, even when they get quilled, they don't seem to get infected at the rate that other mammals do.
Yeah, they can handle it better.
So they think there's a coevolution there.
I may have just saved the day. So similar to how I renamed skunks a long time ago when I learned that they're weasels. Skunks are
still?
shit.
Weasels?
Skunks?
As far as I know.
Oh yeah, skunks
thought
are
they
shit
changed.
weasels.
Well, they're a mustelid.
Yeah, I thought they in their own family now.
Well, we'll have to look.
Yeah.
Well, this is important, I guess, because I may not be able to call them shit weasels anymore because skunks are shit weasels in my mind. Ever
Stop
since
saying
I found
that.
out.
Every time you say that, I'm going to have to bleep it.
It's just shit weasels, Bill. All right. And then, so what if we now call the fisher the face eater weasel?
No, they're death weasel. They've always been death weasel. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like face eater weasel. I don't know. I think there's something about that.
I'm gonna have nightmares. Well, when looking into studies about their diet and their impacts on porcupine populations, I did find that they were important in regulating porcupine populations
Right.
for the sake of trees. But I did not know that timber companies pushed fisher reintroductions for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean that makes a lot of sense.
But
Yeah.
in line with what you were saying, Steve, it comes from an arena that you might not think that
Yeah.
they were pushing for the reintroduction of this animal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in terms of the habitat, since we're talking about forests, they use deciduous, coniferous, and mixed forests, really. And the thing that is most important to them is they like closed canopy cover, tree cover. And previous studies have shown that this is almost exclusive. That's what they absolutely need. But more recent studies have shown they do have a degree of tolerance to open areas throughout their environment, but that there's a certain threshold of closed canopy cover that they need in order to be long-lasting and sustaining. And there's a study that backed this up that took place in Ontario, Canada in 2008, and it found that no fishers were harvested in areas with less than 40% forest cover. So that forest cover is a big one for sure. Habitat selection, in addition to that, is driven by availability of prey and the availability of suitable den sites. So not only do they like forest cover, but usually forests, as we mentioned earlier, that have older or larger trees, because those are the trees that are going to possess cavities for maternity cavities and have older, more places for the fishers to hide in there. Maternity dens are not just in tree cavities, although that's usually the case, but they may include holes in the ground or rock cavities, and then temporary dens that fishers just use to nest in can be a wide variety of things like hollow logs, stumps, brush piles, abandoned beaver lodges, or even just openings in snowbanks, all of those sorts of things.
Is this a good time for us to push those dominoes? So you have to remind me to remind Bill to ask about sizes of males and females.
Well,
and
I was just about to get into reproduction, so sure, if you wanted to do that after I...
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah.
You'll probably talk about it.
All right.
So fishers reach sexual maturity in the first year of their life, but females aren't always receptive at that time. They normally don't breed until age 2, but implantation of the fertilized egg in the blastocyst stage, which I'm hoping one of you two can elaborate on that.
Steve?
Isn't that already after the egg and sperm combined and start dividing?
So they have delayed implantation.
They
right?
do.
Yeah.
Delayed until the following season, about 10 months later. And then the females will usually, as a result of that, give birth at age 3. So reproduction peaks in early March, and breeding may occur as late as May. Average litter size is 2 to 3 young, and kits are born partially furred with closed eyes and ears, and they are essentially helpless at birth and are cared for exclusively by the female, who may mate again as little as 10 days after she gives birth.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that wild? Yeah, that's a crazy
So you
turnaround.
just gave birth.
I know, yeah, back at it.
But will they do another one that season, or is this the second one will lead to in their 4th year giving birth again?
Yes, because of that delayed
Okay.
implantation.
I didn't know if it was delayed, if it's late in the season, but they could do something really quick.
Shout out to our delayed implantation. website.
I thought you guys talked about this
Yeah.
one before.
It's worth the wait. That's what we call it.
So weaning occurs in about 8 to 10 weeks, and then the dispersal of young may occur by their 5th month as interfamilial aggression begins at the onset of autumn. And fishers tend to be solitary except for the brief periods during the breeding season.
So, folks, we're hoping to record soon a follow-up episode to this with a researcher, Dr. LaPointe, who's done research into fishers. And I recently listened to a podcast episode with him, one called To Know the Land. We'll link that in our episode notes. But Dr. LaPointe talked about how female fishers, since they're so significantly smaller than the males, they specifically choose tree cavities that are small enough that they can get into, but males cannot get into. Because males will kill the young. Because think about it, like those offspring are probably from another male.
Right.
And he wants his genes to go on.
Yeah.
So female fishers have evolved to choose den sites that will exclude males.
That just brought a memory to me that I saw of somebody in one of the local Western New York photography pages posted a picture of a fisher. This is kind of dismal, but a fisher that was stuck in a cavity of a tree and it died. Like it got stuck and died.
Probably a very horny male.
Or he really wanted to eat the kits. Yeah.
Hungry and
So, oh my gosh, so that's so funny.
Horngry.
New word, horngry.
Yeah. Look at that. Not funny from the fisher getting stuck and dying, just funny that you mentioned that, because now that brought me back and I wonder if that has something to do with that.
Wow.
Because I always thought that was strange.
Yeah.
Huh.
I just think that's so crazy though, that the females, they get this like 10-day window and they're like, all right.
Back at it. What a life.
I know,
the
right?
life of a fisher.
That's just cruel evolution right there.
Yeah.
Right?
So on to the stuff that everybody likes to talk about whenever you talk about a ferocious predator like this, and that's the diet. And this is something we'll spend a decent amount of time on.
They eat so many turkeys, right? Oh my gosh. They're
tons
killing
of them.
turkeys out there.
Tons
It's
of them.
crazy.
I'm so glad you said that, because I looked so hard into that. So I'm glad we're going to talk about that.
All right, before you do though, let's walk a little bit.
Yeah,
so
sure.
hopefully we can get to some fisher habitat. And since it is nice and muddy, maybe we'll see fisher tracks.
Oh, that would be
Alright.
nice.
That'd be good.
So fishers, although they're known for their carnivorous tendencies, are actually opportunistic omnivores. And especially when seasonally abundant, they will take advantage of seeds and fruits like beech nuts, black cherries, and mountain ash berries. And they'll also scavenge on dead animals, on carrion. And this appears to especially be an important food source to them during the winter time, especially eating dead white-tailed deer. They're not running around killing a bunch of deer fawns either. Fisher are active hunters, which normally you hear about animals being ambush predators, and I'm sure they do to some degree, but everything I find suggests that they're active foragers. They're running around the forest floor, investigating dens and hideouts where small mammals might be hiding, hoping to flush some unsuspecting prey and then chase it down and kill and eat it there. They can be active at all times of the day, but what I found was that in the winter months, they tend to be a little bit more diurnal, and in the warmer months, they tend to be more nocturnal or crepuscular. So a big part of their diet are small mammals, so like lagomorphs, especially like cottontail rabbits and snowshoe hares, squirrels, mostly red squirrels, but gray squirrels, and I even found flying squirrels as well. Wow. And then other smaller rodents like shrews, moles, and voles. But being an opportunistic predator, they won't pass up birds if they get the chance, reptiles, or even amphibians. And like Bill mentioned earlier, they are a big-time predator of porcupines.
So I did come across several sites that mentioned their two main prey species are snowshoe hares and porcupines.
And I think I came across that as well, and I found a study that actually focused on numerical responses of fisher to changing lagomorph and porcupine populations.
Okay.
So, do you know what I'm surprised we haven't heard? I'm surprised I haven't heard anything about eating eggs out of nests or young birds or something.
Yeah, so
unless you said that and I missed it.
No, I mentioned birds, but there's a study that I'll talk about in a moment, and it did find that they did find, eggs, and they lumped that into avian prey as well.
Oh, I see.
So, but this study was conducted at the Sandhill Wildlife Area, which is about 37 square kilometers in Wisconsin, and it's an area that's usually northern conifer or mixed conifer hardwoods, but it also included some oak savannas and prairies. It was a pretty big study. It took place from 1996 to 2013, and essentially what it was a live capture, vaccinate, release program for mammals, and it was very inclusive though, so they saw that it was a good opportunity to use that to document potential populations and abundance of lagomorphs, porcupines, and fisher, and see if there's connections there. And what they had found was that fisher did exhibit a 2-year delay, but a positive numerical response to lagomorph populations. So that would suggest that there is some level of specialization for that prey animal.
Oh, is this like that traditional prey predator oscillation that you see in textbooks?
Well, not to that degree.
Okay.
Because this is the question: is are they a specialist or are they a generalist? And what they had also found was, in the 1 year when lagomorph populations were at an all-time low, fisher populations did start to rise, and that wouldn't be possible if they really specialized on those snowshoe hares and cottontail rabbits. There was also a study that occurred during that time that sampled fisher stomach contents, and they had found that they were eating all kinds of different mammals and other things as well. So that's more indicative of a generalist.
Including fishers.
Right.
Including fishers.
So some of the stomach content, it was in the top 10 of things eaten were other fishers.
That's
So-
amazing.
Was that the Pennsylvania study?
Yes.
That you're yeah, I'll get to.
Yeah.
That's the one that I dive into deepest because
Okay,
that's
cool.
a big one.
Wait, I just have a quick thing. If you already mentioned it, but it just went in one ear and out the other. You said opportunistic omnivore. Did you say what, like, plant material they ate?
Yeah, like beech nuts, cherries,
it.
fruits, mountain ash berries,
Oh,
other things
you
as
did
well.
say
Even
this.
greens. Yeah.
Got it.
So I think this is a good place to stop because one of the things I wanted to be sure to talk about, and mostly because it's just my own experience of people that I see commenting online or people that I talk to, and I work in a rural area where we are right now, so we talk to a lot of hunters, and there's this sense that fishers eat everything. I've heard people say that a lot, and that
I heard that they're opportunistic omnivores. So
you heard right. And I've also had more than a few people who are hunters talk about how they know the fishers must be eating a lot of turkeys, especially the poult, the babies. And in our research, I mean, Danny, you can back me up, that's not what they're doing. Like they're what do you guys say, mesopredator or mesopredator? I've heard it both ways.
Mesopredator.
yeah, I
is the
think
way
I
I've
say
heard it.
meso usually.
Meso, I usually say. So mesopredator is just a middle level predator, like foxes, like
Coyotes,
like
yeah.
these middle level predators. These guys seem to specialize a little more on hares and porcupines, but they are an omnivore. And when that stomach study that you're going to talk about, one of the top 10 materials they found was plant material. So they're not impacting things more than, say, foxes are, or other of those middle level predators. And I think a lot of this negative attitude stems from just that they're a predator, and there's just this kind of ingrained cultural misunderstanding of predators.
For
And the
sure.
misunderstandings tend to move in that negative light.
And they're exacerbated by animals that are elusive, or an anecdotal experience that then gets blown out of proportion.
Right.
Because one hunter may have witnessed a turkey raiding a nest, with poults or something, and then that turns into, well, they're highly destructive, and that's the reason why turkey populations have fallen in certain areas. When that's not.
You did say turkey raiding a nest of poults, which would
Oh,
also
my
be
bad.
fun to see. Just a cannibal turkey, which I'm sure actually happens. I have no idea what turkeys do.
I don't know if turkeys are
Turkeys
cannibals.
are funny things anyway.
Maybe though.
So are you going to talk at all about mesopredator release?
No, I wasn't going to.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I'll save that because there is a negative aspect to the spread of fishers, and I want to talk about that, but we'll save that towards the end.
Okay, yeah, I have something along that line.
You
Okay.
could start saying face eater weasel at any point.
Death Weasel, man.
Death
just
Weasel.
sounds better.
I
Sounds like a metal band. Though.
I won't die on this hill, but I do like Death Weasel. It's not bad.
So what we were saying, they are opportunistic, they're generalists, but they do have their preferred prey. Especially, it appears, in areas like more boreal forests or up in the North Country, where it's a little bit harsher and you don't have as much diversity in terms of prey. So it makes sense that up there is where porcupines and hares would be a more significant part of their diet. But overall, they tend to be more of a generalist. So that's why this Pennsylvania study I thought was real valuable, because it took place in an area that had high fisher density, population density, because from 1994 to 1998, 190 fishers were translocated from northern New York and from New Hampshire and released across northern Pennsylvania, which is a heavily forested state. So between that translocation, it being good habitat, and natural immigration from surrounding areas, the population of fishers skyrocketed there, and it became an ideal place to conduct such a study. So what they did was they sampled the contents of 91 fishers, stomach contents. These were animals that were road killed, incidental trapper killed, or legally harvested from 2002 to 2014. And there was a bias to fall and winter. 83.3% contained evidence of mammalian prey, 12% avian, 12.2% fruits and seeds, so that's a decent amount. 4.4% eggshells and 12.2% foliage. So I mean that's a lot of greens too. So
I'm hearing a lot of turkey and turkey eggshells. In there.
That was 99%.
99%. Yeah. So small animals such as eastern chipmunks, hamsters, voles, mice, and rats.
Hamsters. Yeah.
Yeah. When I looked at Crucidae, that was. I had in my notes Crucidae and then hamsters, voles, mice, and rats. But
You know what it is?
not hamsters.
Okay. They also did a New York hamster release project in Pennsylvania. So it wasn't just Yankee
It's actually
fishers. It was
Fisher breaking into people's homes and eating their pet hamsters after they just destroyed and ran out of turkeys to eat.
those bastards would do it too. You know it.
They would. They totally would.
Weasels.
What I was saying, incorrectly though, where all those small mammals were detected in about 32.3% of their stomachs. So that appears to be a big part of their diet. The most common individual species detected, though, were white-tailed deer, accounting for 13.3%.
They're taking down deer.
Yeah, look at that.
No, I'm kidding.
People, 90%. Just kidding.
Right.
Other fisher, like Bill mentioned earlier, 12.2%, and eastern and Appalachian cottontails at 12.2%. Porcupines are about 11, so still a big part of their diet.
Oh, do you think the fisher is the young?
So here's what I'm going into next. That's more or less unprecedented. That's what the study claims. So they really looked into that.
Yeah.
And what they had to do is they had to rule out certain ideas, like, that it's young, or that is from self-grooming too, because they're finding hair in the stomachs. That's how they're deducing this. If a fisher's grooming himself, it might ingest some of his hair.
It's pica.
Yeah.
One of its own bones by mistake.
What they did was when they found hair that had a lot of flesh attached to it, they figured it was probably not self-grooming. Yeah. So it was determined that 11 of the 12 fishers had eaten other fishers in one way or another. It was not self-grooming. 10 of those 11 were collected between November and February. So that rules out predation of young fishers. So that's your question there.
Not the right time of year.
And then 8 of the 11, so about 72% of the stomachs contained at least like one fisher like digit or claws. A lot of them contain more parts of the paw or the toe pad or some of the phalanx or finger bones.
Oh.
So that's kind of interesting as well.
They have a foot fetish.
There it is. As I was going through the study, I kept coming up with different guesses as to what was going on, but I did not guess their hypothesis, which I'll talk about at the end here. So I thought that it was probably they're eating road-killed fisher, but they were like debunking every thought that I had here. And how they debunked that was they mentioned if they're eating, 12, if the fisher consumption was 12% in this study, and it was mostly roadkill, then that has to mean that they heavily selected road-killed fisher over all the other way more available roadkill, like opossums and raccoon and deer. And that just doesn't make any sense.
That's true.
Yeah, so they kind of ruled out that part there. This study also mentioned an additional study that took place in California in 2015 on an imperiled population of fisher, where there was 58 documented predation events, and none of them exhibited cannibalism. So what you have here, it appears, is you have a healthy population of fisher where there's some cannibalism going on, and in an imperiled population of fisher, they did not find any.
I'm just picturing
So what do you think?
In that population, there's the one fisher that is basically doing like a modest proposal type thing, where it's like, now the rich fisher can buy the poor fisher's children and eat them. And
So, I know.
go ahead,
So it's,
a modest proposal.
yeah, pretty much. It's just overpopulation, right?
That was my guess.
There's a lot
that's
of
what was my
tasty
guess.
fisher around here.
I did just want to mention, though, I looked into that 2015 study. There were 90 fisher in the study that have been killed by some kind of predation, but they can only determine who did it for 58 of them. So there was a solid number, 32 predation events where they were not able to conclude who the culprit was, but for 58 they could, and it was 27 deaths from bobcats, 26 from pumas, 8 from either a puma or a bobcat they couldn't distinguish, 4 from coyotes, 2 from domestic dogs, and 1 from a rattlesnake. I couldn't believe that.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Bill's like, cool. So I thought it was, well, if there's more fisher around, they're gonna eat each other more because it's more available. But then they mentioned that the paws and claws and such aren't very nutrient rich, so that led them
They're just fighting with each other.
to this hypothesis that they have territorial disputes, and they are solitary, so you can imagine if one enters another home range. I also read that females won't enter into males' home ranges, which suggests that there's even like competition and fighting in between sexes, unlike Florida panthers, where the females always went about the males' ranges, which was interesting. So they thought that there were territorial disputes, and it ended with one fisher consuming the feet of the other to remove any scenting or signaling done from its plantar glands.
Oh my God.
So it kills your competition and then removes any lingering scent or after effect that it could still have as a corpse.
Wait.
That's
so
wild.
They're killing another fisher and then they're taking their feet?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's like mafia.
That's interesting. Yeah. And it's because of the whole plantar gland thing. So now it's like, if that fisher's dead, its influence is still in the area through scent. But if you eat its feet, it's not.
Maybe plantar glands taste good.
Maybe that's like a fisher delicacy,
I don't know. They're swallowing them whole. So they're just like, I just got to get this down.
So that was their hypothesis, but there's a couple, I think, discrepancies with that. One is when you broke it down by sex, 7 of the fisher that were found in fisher remains were female and 4 were male. You would think it would be the bigger males that are doing this more. Maybe not. And also, too, I also read a lot that fisher eat a lot of their kill, and it does make sense that fisher would eat feet and claws as well as they're just ripping into the prey, and that takes a lot longer to decompose and thus is overrepresented in a stomach sampling. But this was their hypothesis, and that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so I'd really love, more research into that there.
To go back to what you were saying, how there was this other study in California. So it seems that this kind of predation may only happen when the population is more dense.
Yes, because either way you look at it, whether it's just predation for consumption and subsistence or predation and a territorial dispute, both those things are going to happen much less in an area where they are imperiled, regardless of which one.
Are you going to talk about how they did end up with deer in their stomachs?
Mostly roadkill.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we point that out, that they're actually not killing deer.
Yeah.
So is it considered carrion, like when they're eating? Well, so
they're scavengers
because it's all roadkill, so they're a scavenger
and it's not
as well.
just necessarily roadkill. Like if some other animal kills a deer, then the fishers, if they can, they're opportunistic. So
So this was the study that I saw. I can't remember what website it was. I think it was the U.S. Forest Service. They used this study to make the claim that fisher do not have any sort of significant impact on turkey populations, and it said that in this study, there were 3 birds that were found in the stomachs of fishers, and it was a black-capped chickadee, a ring-necked pheasant, and a downy woodpecker.
Okay.
I don't know how fisher got the drop on some of those birds, but maybe they're already dead. So they say, only 3 birds out of 91 stomachs, neither was a turkey. But when you look at the study, it said that there was about 12% of avian prey. So that's more than 3. But then when you look into it, it said there was 3 eggs in the 3 birds, but that's missing 6 samples of predation on avian prey that just wasn't listed. So there's a little bit of a question mark there, but not nearly enough for people to say, well, those are all turkey probably, and they're
Well, you did also say that there was a bias towards fall and winter collecting too.
Yes, and that is a point that a lot of the folks that are in that notion that turkey are being killed by fisher a lot, they say that because of that bias, that sampling hasn't been done during the turkey nesting season when the poults are out, so it does not accurately represent the damage that fishers are doing. So I'd love to see stomach sampling during that springtime when this alleged, predation on turkeys is going on.
Right.
That would be interesting. But this is not the only study that has more or less debunked the claim that they demolished turkey populations. Right. There's currently one going on with the Finger Lakes Community College. They were given 500 frozen stomachs of fisher by DEC. And it's not out yet because this is like 2020. It's pretty recent. But they're mentioning that, we're able to debunk things like they eat a bunch of pet cats and that, they're destroying turkey populations. So all the evidence really, while it's not like 100% conclusive, the evidence is really pointing to they do not have a big impact on turkeys.
They're an opportunistic hunter.
Yeah.
And the poults are never far from mom. And a turkey's a good-sized bird.
Yes.
So I just don't see a fisher seeing that worth the effort. But again, I'm very interested to see what the studies.
Yeah, so I'd love to see these ones, and because a lot of them are from like trapping, it is like during the winter. I'd love to see if it was one that was more exclusive to roadkill, collected around the springtime. I mean, I feel like that would be the study that can debunk this.
Right.
If that is indeed the truth, which right now that's what the evidence shows. That study at the Finger Lakes Community College also found evidence of fisher cannibalism. So it's not just the Pennsylvania one.
Okay.
So I'd love to see
It's
more.
not just a
looking into
weird
that as
cannibalistic population
In Pennsylvania.
in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
well. So to cats that I just mentioned, because that's a big thing too. Fisher are taking people's cats all the time.
I mean, intuitively, I totally see why people would think both the turkey
Sure.
and the cats, you know, because cats go missing, you know. I'm sure turkey also get taken by whatever, I don't know.
Keep your
but-
cats inside, folks.
I was gonna say, all the more reason to keep them inside,
Yeah.
even if fishers were these big time cat killers. You know.
Yes, they actually are eating lots of cats. So you should keep your cats inside.
Now we're gonna get fact checked.
And they're in
canceled.
every neighborhood that you guys live in.
Even the most urban ones.
That's right.
Every year, the DEC gets a limited number of complaints involving fisher preying on house cats, but a lot of the complaints are very difficult to investigate because they simply involve a missing cat or a missing pet.
Right.
And who do you jump to as the culprit? The big bad. And in a
Coyote,
lot of places,
fisher.
fisher's the big bad. But that's the thing. I feel like it's way more likely for a coyote to be
Sure.
the culprit. You know, other
yeah.
animals, especially because coyotes are way more likely to be around humans in suburban environments. They do, you know, better, like you said in the coyote episode.
Well, and now a lot of people have a lot of more security cameras now and like Ring doorbells and stuff. So you see more videos of like, let's say like a bobcat, like a cat's just relaxing on someone's back porch, and like a coyote or a bobcat comes for it out of nowhere, you know. But the only videos I've seen, the cat got away just fine. But it was
oh, just kidding.
no, it was very desperate to get out of there though. It's like clinging onto the house, getting up, you know, like
Yeah, I just saw that one. It was like
Yeah.
climbing the pole on the person's porch, and there's a
Yeah.
coyote like on the guy's porch.
yeah.
There were other studies too that helped debunk the thing that they eat a lot of cats. One from 1979 to 1980 by Fish and Game, and that occurred in New Hampshire. And they found cat hairs in about 1 in over 1,000 stomachs of fisher.
Wow.
So that's not a high percentage at all.
1 in 1,000?
Yes.
Wow.
And in 2011, an informal unfinished study in upstate New York found no cat remains in 24 scat or stomach samples, and another earlier published study found no trace of cat in 226 samples from Massachusetts. So yes, it does happen, but rarely. And speaking of cats, I didn't look into the study a lot because it's, you know, it is relevant, but I couldn't get to it because it's one of those ones I have to pay for, even with my UB email.
Yeah.
But I found it mentioned a couple times that in Maine, there was 14, over a course of about 10 years, there was 14 documented mortalities of Canada lynx because of fisher. So fisher are killing lynx up in Maine, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, they get the drop on them when they're sleeping there. So the majority of human-fisher interactions, I love the way that DEC puts this. The majority of human-fisher interactions involve observations of animals during outdoor activities such as hunting and hiking, and are regarded by most as a positive experience. Like, how would you rate this encounter with a fisher? But like you mentioned and alluded to earlier, Steve, the department receives, 8 to 12 complaints a year involving negative interactions, and a lot of them are fishers killing domestic fowl. But 8 to 12 complaints a year is not a lot.
Yeah.
In these situations, the department may issue a damage permit, allowing the landowner to trap the fisher and protect their animals.
Sure.
So that's the case with a lot of predators.
We should mention, what's the DEC?
The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
All right.
It's a mouthful. One of the other, I don't want to say myths, because I'm sure some people do hear fisher. Fisher are like heard in everybody's backyard nowadays, and usually they're foxes. Yeah, fishers aren't super vocal. Yeah, foxes vocalize a lot more, and they both have kind of a higher pitched call. It was hard for me to find a recording of a fisher that I was absolutely certain was a fisher, because it was always on YouTube, and it was just the person saying it's a fisher.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a video of a fisher vocalizing. But from what I read, fisher calls tend to be a little bit more blood curdling, up and down pitches, where foxes do that scream and account for a vast majority of these, recorded fisher vocalizations.
So I've actually looked into this several times because I've had people, again, at school ask me, do fishers scream? I heard fishers scream. So you go online, and this is one of those, I don't want to say myths, but it's one of these beliefs that people are adamant about.
Yes.
Fishers scream. And there is little to no evidence of that. Most of what people say are fisher screams seem to be, like you said, red foxes.
Yes.
Most fisher biologists say that fishers are typically quiet, have very few vocalizations. I found one article that referenced 2 videos that showed fishers vocalizing, but these were fishers that were in captivity, and they were stressed. And so they were making noises that sound like screams. And
Well, I'd scream too if I was being cannibalized by
my feet were being chewed off.
Yeah.
by my, what are those pants called again?
Oh, plantar glands.
The plantar
Yeah.
glands.
Yeah.
Yeah, if my plantar's glands were being eaten, I'd be
Or-
screaming too.
The other screams are bobcat vocalizations.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So
against-
foxes and bobcats are just screaming away.
Steve, you've mentioned, like, there's so many videos, trail cams now.
I know.
You look online. I looked up today, bobcats screaming, because I've had people debate, do they scream, do they not scream?
Uh-huh.
You can look up videos of bobcats on a trail cam vocalizing, giving screams. They sound
Yeah,
like
yeah.
screams. I could find nothing online. And again, this is just me looking, but if someone out there can get us actual video of a fisher screaming, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, it'd be cool
I
to
did
see.
come across one researcher who's studied mammals and fishers, Roland Keyes, who's actually worked with Dr. LaPointe that we're going to be interviewing. He did say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Wow, what a classic
So-
line.
So other people have said that.
Uh-huh.
So we can't say for sure that they don't, but it does seem that most of the time that people hear a fisher screaming, it's actually not a fisher.
And usually it's going to be like the animal that's more prevalent in your area.
Right.
And same with down south, it's, oh, I heard a panther, I heard a panther, I heard a panther, and it's usually a bobcat.
Right.
But with Florida panther, you're able to find a video of one screaming
Right.
and know what they sound like.
Right.
Yeah, but I couldn't for fisher either, which is funny.
It's
There's
like
a lot more of
there
them.
are no aliens. Everybody's got a phone.
Well, I was thinking the fisher
They're
scream.
smarter than that, though.
The fisher scream is the cryptid of mammal
There you go.
vocalizations. Yeah.
Perfect. So, in just a testament to the growing populations, thanks to reintroduction programs from New York, there have been continual regulated fisher trapping seasons in northern New York since 1949, with the exception of season closures in 1977, 1983, and 1984. During the past 6 decades, fisher harvests in New York have increased substantially. However, it does appear, and this is from the management plan of DEC in 2015. So it sounds more recent, but my gosh, that was 9 years ago. So.
Yeah.
However,
So we
it
started
appears,
the podcast.
Oh wow, 2015. You're right.
Really?
Yeah.
However, it appears that recent fisher harvests may have now started to exceed sustainable harvest rates for much of the region, and that's because there's been a subsequent decline in harvest intakes per unit of effort. So in this management plan, they suggested reducing the trapping season for both fisher and martin from 46 days to 30 days in a lot of the Adirondack wildlife management units. And when I looked up regulations on DEC, that is in effect, and it has been since 2015. So hopefully, management, just like science, is back and forth. They're constantly learning what the best practices are, and hopefully this is something that gets the fisher back up so everybody can be happy with the fisher population.
Okay,
there.
so I want to make sure I heard you right. So this is just in the Adirondacks or all across New York?
The different zones for fisher trapping are all managed differently. This is for the ones in the Adirondacks.
So
the WMUs
populations
in
were
Adirondacks.
dropping.
Yes.
Okay, so they're reducing
Apparently
the trap.
due to the lower harvest rates. Harvest rates, like per unit of effort, are what they use to calculate approximate populations
good.
in certain areas. And then I did see that there is trapping seasons in western and central New York, but mostly in the southern tier.
Sure.
Yeah, that are managed and have different quotas and that sort of thing from the Adirondack WMUs.
Okay.
So there is kind of a lot to it there. Most fishers are pelted and enter the fur trade through domestic or international outlets, and it does provide income to trappers in New York. And from 2013 to 2015, about, which again isn't super recent, the pelt prices have ranged from like $55 to $158. And I
For
imagine-
one pelt?
For one pelt.
Wow.
And I imagine they're probably worth more because that increased from 2005 to 2015 averages of 30 to 158. So,
Wow.
yeah, they're
That's
worth
a
some
lot.
money. They're nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're nice pelts. So. Yeah. That is the number one cause of their mortality, scientists say, is trapping caused by humans, but they do have some natural enemies like coyotes and like bobcats that also account for some of their deaths. They do have some problems with diseases and parasites, but they're few and far between. Nothing to be real concerned about. Rabies is often a big concern of the public, especially thinking about a rabid fisher or a scary animal that's
Yeah.
rabid. But there's only been a handful of accounts over the years, so that's not anything too concerned with. But out west, they are having a problem with fishers having health issues and dying from rodenticide poisoning. So again, all the more reason to not use rat or mouse poison. There are many other ways that you can deal with mice and rats. Save our local owls and hawks and even fisher now by not using rat poison there. The last thing that I had was just talking about some potential climate change impacts on fisher. And one of them was actually what can cause an increase in fisher population with declining snow levels here in western New York. So fisher are, adapted for walking on snow and running around on snow, but not quite as good as like pine marten are. And pine marten and fisher do occur in similar habitats, but fisher are the dominant ones that will prey on marten or drive marten out through competition. And higher snow levels, which martens are better at hunting in those kind of conditions, help even the odds a little bit, so they can hunt in the subnivean layer, hunt around the snow, while fisher are hunting in other areas without as much snow. But if there's less snowfall in the area because of aspects like climate change or other things, that may tilt the tide a little bit more in favor of the fisher and reduce marten populations. So one of the negative aspects you mentioned earlier, Bill, about rising fisher populations is negative impacts on marten populations where they coexist.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot of the stuff I had about the fisher.
Well,
So
that's
are they territorial with them, or is it just like situational that the pine marten would be doing worse compared to the fisher? Like, or is there disputes between them?
Well, it's disputes over like prey rights and territory, and that fisher will prey on marten.
I kind of like the idea of, hey, these are my resources, and actually, you're one of my resources.
I'm the death weasel.
There you go.
So I think of death weasel, it seems like a metal band, but it would be like on the Muppets.
Death
Right?
weasel.
Death weasel.
That's terrifying.
So what you just said, though, that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about with mesopredator release. So do you remember mesopredator release from the wilderness course?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
So-
I clung to every word you said in that course.
Yeah.
I did.
Well,
So-
it's a typical subject in any like trophic cascade, or
Right.
if you're taking a class that covers that.
So we're throwing around a lot of terms here, folks. But Daniel, when you were doing your research, did you come across why fishers are doing better here in the east as opposed to the west?
I didn't come across research that said it, but my speculation would be one of the reasons is we don't have pumas and wolves here like the West
Exactly.
has. Yeah.
So, folks, one of the things when Daniel was in my wilderness class, one of the things I always talked about to the kids is the importance of top predators like wolves, like mountain lions. If you're interested in ecological health, we want systems to be ecologically whole, and they can't be ecologically whole and as diverse as we want them to be without top predators. So, yes, here in the east we do have hunters, and hunters do play an important role in helping to control deer populations and herbivore populations and other populations. But remember, hunters are out for a limited time of the year and even for a limited time of the day. They are not on the job 24/7 the way top predators are, so they do not function in anywhere near the same capacity as top predators do.
Yeah, there's different types of prey responses,
Yeah.
and if I remember right, I think hunters more evenly hunt, whereas, and that's one type of response where like deer, it's not like deer specifically just avoid one area for a period of time. They're still sort of scattered throughout the area. But I think the type of response that a top predator has is that deer completely avoid certain areas during certain times, and then at other times they'll go into those areas. But it's just a different type of prey movement, and
Right.
it has a
Ecology
different
of fear.
and then it has a different
Exactly.
response on like the plants that grow and so and so.
Even just
so.
the presence of top predators
Yeah.
can have impacts on prey populations beyond the actual killing of the prey.
Yeah.
So when you remove top predators, what you're allowing to happen is you're going to have an increase in overabundance usually of herbivores, which is what we have in most of our forests because we have too many deer. You're going to reduce that biodiversity, and you cause what I shouldn't say you cause, but what happens is mesopredator release. All those middle-level predators whose populations were held in check by the top predators, suddenly now those populations can explode. And that causes a whole chain of events, one of which I know we all care about, which is bird abundance, because all those middle-level predators are now going to be feeding on birds, especially young birds, and that's just one group of animals that's going to be impacted. So the fact that these fishers are spreading and their populations are expanding, yes, it's a good thing in terms of diversity, in terms of we have more and different kinds of animals in our forests. They're still occupying that mesopredator niche that foxes and raccoons and animals of that type are occupying, and they're not filling that top role. That's the problem with coyotes too. I know people treat coyotes like top predators, but they're not. They just do not fill the same ecological niche that wolves or mountain lions do. So I don't know if we're necessarily making the problem worse.
I say, as we talk more and more, like, I know I tried to give like a very vague version of those predator responses, but I was like, a lot of this stuff was so long ago in terms of like covering the literature, and also and the more you look into something, the more you realize how complicated it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's what, and like ecology is a huge gray area.
Yeah.
So,
because I'm sure if it was as easy as what we were saying, like not, or as simple as what we were saying,
right?
That, like, oh, just reintroduce the top predators, and then, you know,
everything will be cool.
Yeah, everything will be fine. But you know,
and in most areas here in the East, we can't reintroduce top predators.
Well, in regarding to making things worse, it's not like the same impact that all the coyotes are having on small mammals and other animals, and the fact that there were population declines because of overtrapping and they had to cut back a little bit also doesn't suggest that there are now too many fishers that are problematic. So I would not say that things are worse right now, especially because the fisher seems to be a little bit more needy in terms of its spatial needs compared to what people do. Like, we create edge habitat, we create habitat that's more suitable for mesopredators like foxes and coyotes, but that kind of stuff that we do is not helpful for fishers. So I wouldn't say that we're making it worse or it's approaching anywhere near the impact of like having more coyotes or other mesopredators would be.
And I don't want to get people to think that it's a bad thing, like it's all a bad thing. I'm just saying there's nuance to it.
Oh yeah.
And one of the questions that I'd be interested to ask Dr. Lapointe is, if you have a forest area and you have, your variety of mesopredators in that forest area, and then fishers are introduced, obviously some of the other species of mesopredators, their populations will be impacted and probably shrink a bit. Does that cause an increase in overall forest health? Because even though you still have, a bunch of mesopredators and no top predator, are you moving it in more of a biodiverse direction? Not just because of the fishers, but does it impact other species as well? And just from based on what we talked about, I think it would, because most mesopredators aren't going to go after porcupines, but fishers will.
Right.
So they're going to be impacting, and that's then again going to impact other species.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think you have to not just consider, is it the mesopredator niche that's filled? Because I don't know if that's actually something we would call a niche.
Right.
It'd be like, there's a specific niche that some mesopredators fill, such as like eating porcupines or something, and maybe there's not another, even if there's other mesopredators, maybe they're not the one that does that.
Right.
So,
bottom line,
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah, right.
And it's interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Lifelong learning.
All right. So one thing we did forget to do is we forgot to do our gum leaf ad break.
Oh, and you're even wearing yours today.
I am wearing my gum leaf boots. So Steve, I'm going to have you tell the audience about gum leaf boots.
Okay, Bill, so launch boats, walk through streams, or just laugh at the rain. Wait, you say laugh at the rain?
Sure.
Gumleaf USA's handmade boots are made from one-piece rubber sheets containing 85% natural rubber. Styles, 5 styles.
There's at least 5
There's
styles.
at least 5 styles are available for men and women, and patrons of the podcast receive free shipping.
And just recently, I did go out on an evening to our friend Donna's to look for salamanders.
Oh.
And there was a group of people there. We were looking for salamanders, and someone who knows about the podcast, they're like, "Are you wearing your gum leaf boots?" I sure am.
Wow.
Wouldn't go salamandering without them.
I don't have gum leaf boots, and my feet got wet today, early on.
Oh, yeah. Mine
Today,
did too,
right
but
now.
that's my own fault.
All right, so we're going to wrap up now. I want to start out with a shout out to Noelle at Homestead Culture. So Noelle, you can find her and her family on Instagram at homestead.culture. And she included our episode on deer exclosures in an online course she recently published on helping to control deer impact on your garden and landscaping.
I take that personally, because I'm not on that episode.
That is true. That's a Steve-less
That's
episode.
why she used it.
I guess, yeah, I think so.
I think she said that in her email.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in homesteading, saving seeds, any of that kind of stuff, check out homestead.culture on Instagram.
All right. So first and foremost, we'd like to thank our growing list of Patreon supporters. So thank you to our new patrons, Kelly Smith and Rich Kingston.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
So Rich Kingston, folks, he's a friend of the podcast. You know him. He was in one of our best episodes, the Screech Owl episode.
Yeah, that's a good episode.
If you have not listened to that episode, folks.
Fake. It's a fake episode.
Oh, you know what? Remind me, I got to talk about that when we get to our iTunes reviewers.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
We also like to give a special shout out each month to our top patrons. So stick around to the end of the episode to hear Bill's daughter Violet share the list. And remember, if you'd like to be part of the Field Guides and read our Patreon list in future episodes, email us at thefieldguides@gmail.com. And if you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, consider becoming a patron of our show at patreon.com. Patrons get access to a special patrons-only version of our episode that include Bill sharing the episode notes. Because of support from our listeners, we've been able to keep the show free and make cooler episodes like our Florida Panther one.
Also Steveless.
Yeah, also a Steveless episode. Or you can make a one-time donation through PayPal on our website. And don't forget that we have Field Guides merch available through our website store at thefieldguidespodcast.com. And remember, if you can't financially support the podcast, you can help out by sharing it with friends, family, and by subscribing and leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps spread the word.
Did you say spread the Lord?
Spread the Lord, Steve.
Yeah, help spread the word of Jesus Christ. All right. It helps spread the word and allows us to reach a wider audience. We'd like to thank our newest iTunes reviewers.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. I'll just say Egg JFJS.
And Egg JFJS, he left a very nice comment, but he said he was concerned. He had listened to our episode where we talked about what we faked in terms of our background noises.
Oh.
That was an old one. But he was concerned about what else we're faking.
You know what? There is an episode, I do remember this, where we had a similar comment about this, where someone but they were very upset about it, about us faking stuff. And I think it might have been because of the episode with Rich.
Yes.
And what I did was I played clips from every time we've ever lied to the audience. And it was nothing. It was like, one time Bill made a comment and I was like, "Are you drinking a beer?" And I added in the noise of a beer can opening. All of them were very subtle like that, but it wasn't, I don't think we've ever, unless we're like, "Oh, is that a pileated woodpecker right now?" Like, we make it so obvious when we lie that it's not really lying. So
it happens so rarely.
Yeah.
We almost always, we eventually tell.
I don't think anyone would ever fall for it because we're not trying to trick anyone.
Right. If we were going to put in fake sounds, we'd make it totally obvious.
In fact, editing the podcast is so much harder because we're not faking sounds, because we're actually out on the trail. We're not lying in the opening or anything. So yeah, those are real planes going overhead and real footsteps that you're hearing. Yeah. All right, so come enjoy our irregular posts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can always email us ideas for the episode topics, criticisms, or your stories of fisher cats, red pandas, or other poorly named critters to thefieldguides@gmail.com.
And parents, remember to get those kids outside. Let them flip over rocks, flip over logs, let them get muddy and dirty. And if you don't have kids, make time to get yourself outside as well.
All right, see you next time.
See you next time,
Bye,
folks.
everybody.
And now, here is Violet with this episode's top patrons.
Alyssa P., Eric G., Adam the Hebranks, Mary R. B., Sung, Daniel M., Diane, Dr. Judy, Jessica D., Callie, Kimberly B., Orange Julianne, Peter R., we named the dog Indy, Hot Dog Cold Weather, D.
Yep.
JJ Kathy, Dwayne H., Jonathan A., Andrew C., Ben C., Bethany, Brant S., Cecilia D., Chris N., Colin G., Connor H., Dennis, Doodle Dude 82, Esther C., Frigaria Pepoloinoidea, Gail and Mac, Helen A., Jane H., Jeff S., John W., Jonathan K., Judy F., Julie B., Kazies, Kelly S., Quixote, Leslie H., Mark V., Matt E., Max D., Measure and Principal, Melissa Marie, M. Toulan, Outside Chronicles, Rob M., Sarah S., Sean M., Sophie S., and Hannah M.
Well done, Violet.
Thank you.
Thank you, patrons. On behalf of Steve and Daniel, I want to thank you for your support. It does mean the world to us. And Violet, thank you.
Bye.
See you next time, folks.